Welcome, friends of the Greasy Shop Rag. Today we're going to take a look at a Husqvarna 525PT5S pole saw. The customer complaint is that it's running boggy, just not running right at all. So the first thing we're going to do, like almost all my repairs, is we're going to look inside the fuel tank and see what he's burning. We're going to take a look at the fuel filter, and we're going to pressure test the fuel line. So right away you can see this filter has a blue tint to it. There's oil in the fuel. The fuel doesn't smell bad. I'm putting 10 pounds of pressure on this fuel line, and we want it to hold. And it is. I wiggled the line a little bit, because if there's a crack in the line, it might only be exposed when it's bent at a certain angle. Everything in the tank looks good, so I don't think we have a fuel-related problem as far as the tank filter and line are concerned. The primer bulb seems to work, although a little sluggish. I'm not sure why that is. Typically, a plugged micro screen in the carburetor could be a reason for that. A plugged up fuel filter could be a reason for that. Kinked fuel line. We're going to open up the carb anyway, so we'll be able to address some of that stuff. The air filter, the foam filter in there, it doesn't look terrible. There's a felt filter behind that foam one that I'm trying to pop out right now. There we go. I mean, that's not all blocked up. So we have some kind of schmutz, and I don't know what it is. Almost like a white gel. And I have to believe it is somehow water related. I don't know how it got there, what it is, if it's spit back out of the carburetor. I didn't check the bottom of the tank for water, but I don't think that's the problem, really. We'll get a better idea when we're in the carburetor. So I want to take this top cover off. Whenever working on these 525 engines in the Husqvarna lineup, pulling this cover off just makes life so much easier. Even for just gaining access to the spark plug. Blow away the schmutz. We'll spin this plug out of here. Well, it looks like someone already tried to fix their problem by threading a new plug into it. It must not have fixed it because they brought it in to me. Looking inside the cylinder, it's just perfect in there. It looks just as clean and shiny as could be. So we'll get this plug put back in and torque down to spec. Alright. What do we want to do next? We really should run it. The outer part of the foam filter looks good. Let's see what it sounds like. So it has a massive bog and won't rev up. I want to look in the carburetor. It just makes sense to look in there. So we'll remove the 2 screws that go through the air filter base and through the carburetor. Everything's kind of just hanging here right now. Let's get these screws right out. Here's our gasket. Don't want to lose that. We're going to unhook our throttle wire. There we go. Another gasket. All right, we got to get these fuel lines off of here. We're going to use our handy dandy homemade fuel line removal tool. The thing works pretty good. You need to grind yourself one. I'm going to get a plug for this fuel line because theoretically it should be pumping fuel out of here. It didn't because I cracked the fuel cap. Alright, we've harvested a carburetor. So that looks like there's some evidence of, you know, the adjustment screws being turned. They're scratched up a little bit. Let's take this fuel pump cover off of here and get a look at that micro screen. So the pump itself doesn't look terrible. It's not all stretched out. And the micro screen, I mean, it looked all right. So something else is going on here. And a lot of times that something else can be the metering diaphragm. And a stiff or stretched metering diaphragm can create different results. Sometimes it's flooding, sometimes it won't let any fuel in. And possibly sometimes it could be explain our bog. So this diaphragm is pretty stiff. And one would believe that putting a carb kit in here is going to fix this problem. But you're going to see that this thing actually had more than one problem going on. And we'll get to that toward the end of the video. So what I'm doing now is I'm gently seating the high and the low speed screws on the carburetor. And then I'm counting the turns that it took to do that. And then I'll back the jet all the way out so I can blow some carb cleaner through it and clean that passageway. And then once clean, I'll be able to turn the jet back in all the way lightly seated to the bottom and back it out those amount of turns that I counted. This puts the carburetor back in the same adjustment range as it was when I found it. That way, when I start it up and run it, I'll know whether or not any of my efforts made any progress on how it runs. If I were just to back the screws out to some known amount of turns, I wouldn't really know if cleaning the jets or replacing the diaphragm helped at all. So I kind of want to put it back in the same spot. It also makes it easier if you don't have the specs for where the carb should be. So you can see that I cleaned that passageway out. I'm just going to wipe this jet down a little bit before I put it in. And I say jet, but that's a needle. So, where are we at here? Look like I'm lost. Couldn't find my adjustment tool. We'll run it all the way down. It's a long way. Fine thread screw. and then we back it out the amount of turns that it took to seat it. Same with this one. Wipe it down and then gently seat it and back it out. These 525 power heads have a Walbro WTEA carburetor on them, and I have seen a lot of them where the idle adjustment screw is broken right off of the pump cover plate. If you have one that just won't idle at all, the first thing you might want to do is look and see if that screw broke off of there or not. Now this is a bogging problem more than an idling problem, so that doesn't really apply, but here you go. Our gauge has got the WTEA listing on it. We're checking the metering lever height right now. We just lay the gauge across the top of the carb, and that nub on the gauge should just be touching the end of the metering lever. So here's our kit. I think we're just putting soft parts in this one, meaning the gaskets. There's our metering diaphragm on top of the gasket. And then our cover. And we'll screw it down. So just remember, this video isn't going to be just a carb refresh video. This video is going to dive a little bit deeper into another problem that typically has mechanics, loading the parts cannon up and firing away. And the problem I'll explain later, but pinpointing the problem can be difficult because it looks like everything that we are basing this carb refresh off of. And what I mean by that is the symptoms are the same. We have a situation where it appears that the low speed on this carburetor is sluggish, plugged, blocked. It bogs on the bottom end, but it seemed to run on the higher end. And there's something else that can create that. And trying to pinpoint whether it's the carb or whether it's this other thing can be difficult. I don't want to quite give it away yet because I'm hoping some of you will figure it out on your own. I haven't figured it out yet. And either way, you have to do this step before you do the next step. And it was justified. That metering diaphragm was not very good. It was pretty stiff. And by all rights, in most repairs, replacing it would fix this problem. And I guess part of the issue is that I have this problem with the diaphragm and the other problem we're about to talk about. And they're overlapping each other, so it's a bit of a difficult one to diagnose. And usually best handled with the parts cannon. So you notice that I torqued down the intake insulator. Anytime I got the carb off on these, I try to remember to do that because them screws can come loose. Alright, we're kind of getting oriented here. Now we're going to put the fuel lines on the carburetor. Now that I've got that main line on there, I can tighten the cap. Because if I don't tighten it now, I'll forget and I'll have fuel all over the front of my shirt. loading the gasket on the bolts, pushing the bolts through the carburetor, getting the choke lever lined up in the choke handle, and then loading a gasket on the bolts and making sure that it's lined up the way it came off. I mean, it's a used gasket, so we don't want to create any problems by having it upside down. So yeah, I know you're thinking, what is this other problem he's talking about? Is it an air leak? Is it something in the ignition? Should he have taken a better look inside the fuel tank? Is there a excessive load on the engine? I don't know. Did you figure it out? Let's run it again. That throttle cable is it's designed to stay in place with the orange cover over the top of the engine. There's kind of a locating tab that holds it down. Because I'm trying to run it without it on there and I wasn't paying attention, it all came undone. So I had to kind of reset that. Quarter turn rich on both screws. Yeah, I'm starting to get a little frustrated with that throttle cable. I should have just put the cover on there. But, you know, time is money. Taking shortcuts, you know, is usually the goal. Although sometimes shortcuts cost us more time. It's a game that we play all day long. If you methodically go through a piece of equipment and make a lot of steps that weren't needed, instead of just guessing, sometimes it takes more time, sometimes your guess is right the first time. A lot of times your guess is wrong the first time, and you have to go back and start from the beginning anyway. So you just have to decide what works for you, but a lot of times my shortcuts are just based on what I'm seeing as I'm going. And I don't always methodically go step by step. For example, here, one must load a screw in the hole before he puts the driver in the hole to turn the screw. I think I left it in there before, but it fell out. Alright, we're going to try this again. What am I going to do? I'm going to put another quarter of a turn rich on each of the screws. this thing clearly is not responding to my low speed adjustments. It is running good on the top end, but on the bottom, you know, it might idle, but as soon as I hit the trigger, it bogs. Sometimes it doesn't idle. I am all over the place on that low speed adjustment. I've tried super rich and super lean, and it just is not responding the way I want. And right now I'm thinking the reason for that is that the ignition coil might be jacked up. The coil has a built-in timing curve to it, so that at low speed the timing is not so advanced, and at high speed the timing advances more, so that it'll run smooth at all RPMs. Well, sometimes these coils take an eternal dump, and they're kind of locked into full advance in the timing. And if you're running that full advance at low speed, the engine, if it idles, does not want to rev up decent, and you get exactly what we're seeing here. A situation that mimics a low speed plugged jet. Well, we were in there, we cleaned up the carburetor. We know that, we think that the low speed's not plugged up. And this one, it can be hard to diagnose. I mean, there's not a tool I can just connect the coil to and say, hey, look at that. The timing advance isn't working properly. You have to know the symptoms, eliminate the other possibilities, and then load the cannon and fire away with a new coil. And I make it sound like a lot of guesswork, but if you know what the symptoms are, you know, going into the carburetor was justified. Looking at this coil is going to be justified as well, as you'll see at the end of the video here. And the other thing we could have checked for was an air leak. We did check at the intake insulator by tightening the screws down, but we didn't check the cylinder base gasket or the crank seal. And to be honest with you, those don't go bad on these things very often. So we're going to try this again, and if I can fire this up and get some adjustment out of that carburetor, then that's all I'm going to have for you on the Husqvarna 525PT5S pole saw. It had a big bog in it. Thanks for watching. Later.